The radio crackled with static before General Morrison's voice cut through the chaos like a blade through flesh. All units be advised, Hawk 7 is down. Repeat, Hawk 7 is down. Air cover is compromised. The command bunker fell silent except for the hum of electronics and distant artillery. 23 souls trapped behind enemy lines, and their guardian angel had just been shot from the sky. Captain Alina Reaper Vasquez pressed her face against the reinforced window of the forward operating base, watching smoke trails dissipate in the amber sunset. Her A-10 Thunderbolt sat on the tarmac like a sleeping beast, its twin engines cold, its GAU-8 cannon pointed toward Earth. She'd been grounded for 3 days, maintenance issues, they said. But Alina knew the truth. Morrison didn't trust her judgment after Kandahar. The general's aide, Lieutenant Collins, approached with practiced military bearing. "Ma'am, you're still not cleared for." "I heard the transmission," Alina interrupted, her voice carrying the weight of 8 combat deployments. Her flight suit bore patches from missions most pilots only dreamed about, but tonight she felt invisible, forgotten. The kind of pilot they wheeled out for ceremonies but kept chained during real crisis. Through her headset, she caught fragments of desperate radio chatter. Bravo Company was pinned down in a valley 30 clicks northeast, ammunition running low, casualties mounting. The enemy had anticipated their air support patterns, positioned SAM sites with surgical precision. Hawk 7, Captain Rodriguez, her former wingman, had been the 3rd aircraft lost in as many hours. Alina's fingers traced the scar across her left temple, a souvenir from her last flight over Afghanistan. The brass had written it off as pilot error, but she remembered every detail. The missile lock warning, the split-second decision to save a convoy of refugees, the taste of blood when shrapnel pierced her helmet. They'd given her a medal and a desk assignment. Standard protocol for damaged goods. Morrison's voice boomed through the base intercom. "All available aircraft are grounded pending tactical reassessment. This is not a request." The words hung in the air like smoke from burning fuel. But Alina wasn't listening anymore. She was calculating distances, fuel loads, ordnance configurations. Her ground crew, Rodriguez, Kowalski, and Chen, caught her eye from across the hangar. They'd worked together for 3 years, spoke in gestures and shared glances. Without words, they understood what needed to happen. The enemy had drawn first blood, taking out their best pilots with methodical precision. Command was paralyzed by fear, unwilling to risk more assets. But 23 soldiers were dying in that valley, and Alina Reaper Vasquez had never abandoned her people. She pulled on her helmet and walked toward her aircraft, each step echoing like thunder in the gathering darkness. The maintenance hangar buzzed with tension as Alina approached her A-10. Staff Sergeant Martinez looked up from a hydraulics panel, his weathered face creased with concern. "Captain, we haven't finished the pre-flight inspection. They're still." "How long?" Alina's question cut through his explanation like a knife through silk. She'd flown with Martinez for 6 years, trusted him more than most of her commanding officers. He understood aircraft the way poets understood words. Martinez wiped his hands on an oil-stained rag meeting her eyes. 30 minutes if we skip the non-essentials." His voice dropped to a whisper. "But Captain, the general's orders were explicit. No sorties until—" "The general's orders don't account for Bravo Company bleeding out in that valley." Alina began her walk-around inspection, muscle memory guiding her hands over familiar surfaces. The A-10's titanium bathtub cockpit bore scuff marks from previous missions, each scratch telling a story of survival. Through the hangar's open doors, she could see Morrison's command staff clustered around tactical displays, their faces illuminated by the cold glow of digital maps. They were planning contingencies, calculating acceptable losses, weighing political ramifications. Meanwhile, real soldiers were running out of ammunition and hope. Alina's radio crackled. Any station, this is Bravo 6 Actual. We are taking heavy fire from multiple positions. Request immediate close air support over. The voice belonged to Major Thompson, a 20-year infantry veteran she'd supported during 3 previous operations. She could hear the desperation beneath his professional composure. Command's response was swift and cold. Bravo 6 actual, negative on air support. All assets are grounded pending tactical reassessment. Hold your position and wait for reinforcement over. Alina's jaw tightened. She'd heard that tone before, the bureaucratic distance that transformed human beings into acceptable statistics. Morrison was playing it safe, protecting his career while soldiers died. It was the same calculus that had grounded her after Kandahar, the same fear-based leadership that prioritized appearances over results. Martinez appeared at her side with a flight helmet. "If you're doing this, Captain, you're not doing it alone. Kowalski and Chen are prepping a full load of Mavericks and 30 Mike. His eyes held the kind of loyalty that couldn't be manufactured or mandated. Alina nodded, accepting the helmet with steady hands. The familiar weight felt like coming home. She'd been born to fly, trained to kill, and shaped by 8 years of combat into something harder than the titanium surrounding her cockpit. Tonight, she would remember why they'd given her the call sign Reaper. The A-10's engines began their characteristic whine as Alina strapped herself into the pilot's seat. Every gauge, every switch, every control surface responded to her touch like extensions of her own body. This aircraft had carried her through hell and back, had absorbed enemy fire while delivering death with surgical precision. She keyed her radio to Bravo Company's frequency. "Bravo 6 actual, this is Reaper. I'm coming to get you." The A-10's twin General Electric TF-34 engines spooled up with a sound like controlled thunder, drowning out the protests from the control tower. Alina's hands moved across the instrument panel with practiced efficiency, bringing 30,000 pounds of armored attack aircraft to life. Warning lights blinked and faded as systems came online, each green indicator another step toward inevitable confrontation. "Reaper, this is Tower. You are not cleared for takeoff. Return to parking immediately." The voice belonged to Colonel Sanders, Morrison's second-in-command. Alina had flown missions with Sanders before he'd been promoted to a desk job, back when he understood that sometimes orders needed to be interpreted rather than blindly followed. Alina keyed her mic. "Tower, Reaper is declaring an emergency. I have critical mechanical issues requiring immediate flight test." Her voice carried the calm authority of 8 deployments and 47 confirmed kills. She wasn't lying. The mechanical issue was that her aircraft was still on the ground while her people were dying. Through her heads-up display, she could see Morrison's staff car racing across the tarmac, emergency lights flashing. They'd figured out her intentions, but they were too late. The A-10 was already rolling. Its massive GAU-8 Avenger cannon pointed toward the runway like an accusation. Alina's radio crackled with Bravo Company's frequency. Any station, we are taking casualties. Enemy mortars have our position dialed in. We need immediate extraction or close air support over." Thompson's voice had lost its professional composure, replaced by the raw desperation of a commander watching his soldiers die. The A-10 lifted off with the grace of controlled violence, its stubby wings catching air like a bird of prey. Alina climbed into the purple twilight, leaving the arguments and politics of the forward operating base behind. At 5,000 feet, the world transformed into a tactical problem requiring surgical solutions. Her heads-up display painted the landscape in green and amber, marking friendly positions with blue icons and known threats with red triangles. 30 kilometers northeast, Bravo Company's transponders blinked like dying stars in a constellation of violence. Intelligence reports showed enemy positions in a horseshoe formation, with heavy machine guns and mortars creating an interlocking field of fire. Alina armed her weapons systems, feeling the familiar weight of destructive potential at her fingertips. 4 AGM-65 Maverick missiles hung beneath her wings like sleeping serpents, while her GAU-8 cannon held 1,174 rounds of 30 depleted uranium ammunition. Each bullet weighed nearly 2 pounds and traveled at nearly 3,000 feet per second. Morrison's voice cut through her radio. "Reaper, you are ordered to return to base immediately. This is a direct order from Theater Command. Acknowledge, over." His tone carried the authority of rank and the fear of a general watching his carefully laid plans unravel. Alina switched off that frequency and keyed into Bravo Company's net. "Bravo 6 Actual, this is Reaper. I'm 10 minutes out with a full load. Mark your positions with strobes and get your heads down. Time to go to work." The valley stretched below Alina like an open wound, carved deep between rocky ridges that glowed amber in the fading light. Through her night vision, she could see muzzle flashes winking like deadly fireflies, enemy positions revealing themselves with each burst of automatic fire. Bravo Company was trapped in the valley's mouth, their vehicles scattered behind inadequate cover, their defensive perimeter shrinking under relentless pressure. Alina's targeting pod swiveled with mechanical precision, painting enemy positions with invisible laser light. The thermal imaging revealed heat signatures of hostile fighters, their weapon systems, and the telltale glow of motor tubes still warm from recent firing. They'd chosen their ambush site well: high ground on 3 sides, multiple escape routes, and clear fields of fire down into the killing zone. "Bravo 6 Actual, Reaper on station. I count approximately 30 hostiles in defensive positions along the north and east ridgelines. Confirm strobes are active, over." Alina's voice carried the cold professionalism of someone who had delivered death from above for 8 years. Each word was measured, precise, final. Thompson's response crackled through static. "Reaper, strobes are active. We have wounded who cannot move. Request you make this count, we're down to our last magazines." His voice carried the weight of command decisions no officer should have to make. Alina selected her first target, a heavy machine gun position dug into the eastern ridgeline, its crew systematically raking Bravo Company's defensive positions. The weapon's muzzle flash had been strobing every few seconds, each burst sending soldiers diving for inadequate cover. Through her targeting pod, she could see the gun crew's heat signatures, 3 men who had chosen the wrong profession on the wrong day. She squeezed the trigger. The GAU-8 Avenger cannon erupted with a sound like the world tearing apart, its 7 rotating barrels unleashing 70 rounds per second of depleted uranium death. Each round weighed 1.59 pounds and struck with the kinetic energy of a small car crash. The machine gun position simply ceased to exist, replaced by a crater smoking in the thermal imaging display. Alina pulled up from her diving attack, feeling the familiar press of G-forces as the A-10 clawed for altitude. Below, enemy fighters were repositioning, their discipline breaking as they realized their carefully planned ambush had become a slaughter. Some fled toward prepared escape routes while others doubled down, swinging their weapons skyward in desperate attempts to engage the aircraft tearing their world apart. Her radio crackled. "Reaper, that's a confirmed kill. Enemy fire from the east has ceased. We're still taking mortar rounds from the North Ridge, over." Thompson's voice carried renewed hope, the kind that came from watching professional death delivered with surgical precision. Alina was already lining up her second attack, responding to her inputs like an extension of her own predatory instincts. The mortar position had been firing blind, lobbing shells into Bravo Company's perimeter based on predetermined coordinates. Now they would learn what it felt like to be hunted by something that could see in the dark and strike with devastating accuracy. The second attack run began as Alina rolled inverted, diving toward the northern ridgeline where enemy mortars continued their methodical bombardment. Through her heads-up display, she watched their muzzle flashes bloom like deadly flowers against the darkening landscape. The mortar crews had excellent cover natural rock formations and prepared fighting positions that would have been nearly impregnable against ground assault. Alina armed a Maverick missile, its infrared seeker head automatically acquiring the largest heat signature on the ridgeline. The weapon's guidance system painted targeting data across her display: range, bearing, target identification, probability of kill. Mathematics reduced to its most primitive function, the conversion of living beings into statistical probabilities. Magnum, 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 Alina transmitted, announcing her missile launch to any friendly aircraft in the area. The AGM-65 dropped from its pylon and ignited, its solid rocket motor accelerating the 100-pound warhead toward its target at twice the speed of sound. Below, someone was about to experience the last 3 seconds of their life. The explosion bloomed orange against Alina's night vision, temporarily whiting out her display as the Maverick's shaped charge warhead detonated against the rock face. When her vision cleared, the mortar position had been transformed into a smoking crater 20 feet across. The bombardment of Bravo Company ceased immediately. Alina's radio erupted with voices. "Outstanding, Reaper. Mortar fire has stopped." Thompson's relief was audible even through the static. "We're still taking small arms fire from multiple positions, but we can move our wounded now." Alina pulled up from her dive, scanning for remaining threats. Her targeting pod revealed individual fighters attempting to reposition, their thermal signatures bright against the cooling rocks. These were the survivors, professional soldiers who understood that their ambush had failed but weren't ready to abandon their positions. They would fight to the end, making each shot count. Through her earpiece, Alina could hear Morrison's voice on the command frequency. "All units, be advised that Reaper is operating without authorization. Any pilot providing support will face court-martial proceedings." His words carried the bureaucratic rage of a general watching his authority crumble in real time. Alina switched frequencies again, tuning into the emergency channel monitoring all aircraft in theater. Any station, this is Reaper. I am currently engaged in close air support for troops in contact. If any pilot copies this transmission and has ordnance available, Bravo Company could use the help, over. The response came immediately from an unexpected source. "Reaper, this is Viper 11, F-16 with a full load 20 minutes south of your position. Coming to assist, over." The voice belonged to Captain James "Viper" Rodriguez, Hawk 7's wingman, supposedly grounded with the rest of the squadron. Alina smiled grimly inside her helmet. Morrison's authority was evaporating as quickly as his carefully laid plans. Real pilots understood that some things transcended regulations, that loyalty flowed upward from the cockpit rather than downward from conference rooms. Tonight, the Air Force would remember what it meant to support the soldiers bleeding in the dirt below. She keyed her radio. "Viper 11, welcome to the party. I'll mark targets with my laser, you provide the fireworks." Captain Rodriguez's F-16 streaked across the valley at 500 knots, its single Pratt & Whitney engine painting a blue flame against the darkening sky. Alina watched the Fighting Falcon through her night vision as it rolled inverted and pulled into a steep diving attack, its pilot demonstrating the kind of aggressive tactics that separated combat veterans from peacetime aviators. "Vipers in hot," Rodriguez transmitted, his voice tight with concentration. The F-16 carried 2 GBU-12 paveway laser-guided bombs, each containing 500 pounds of high explosive designed to solve problems that couldn't be negotiated away. Alina painted a cluster of enemy fighting positions with her targeting laser, creating an invisible beam that the paveway seeker head would follow to its devastating conclusion. Below them, the remaining enemy fighters had realized their tactical situation had deteriorated beyond recovery. Some were attempting to withdraw toward prepared extraction points, while others continued engaging Bravo Company with increasingly desperate fire. They'd been trained for ambushing convoys and terrorizing civilians, not fighting professional military aviators with unlimited ordnance and thermal imaging systems. Alina's radio crackled with Morrison's voice, transmitted on the emergency frequency. All aircraft, this is General Morrison. You are ordered to cease all offensive operations and return to base immediately. This is a direct order from Theater Command. Over. His words carried the authority of rank but lacked the moral weight that motivated real soldiers. Rodriguez responded without hesitation. General, this is Viper 1-1. I'm experiencing radio difficulties and cannot copy your transmission. Continuing my attack. Over. His tone suggested that technical problems might persist until Bravo Company was safely extracted. Alina smiled inside her helmet. Rodriguez had been her wingman during her first combat deployment, back when they'd been young lieutenants learning to kill efficiently. He'd been shot down over Syria and spent 18 hours behind enemy lines before Special Operations Forces could extract him. Some experiences created bonds that transcended military hierarchy. The GBU-12 detonated against the western ridgeline with surgical precision, its blast wave rolling across the valley like artificial thunder. The explosion eliminated an entire squad of enemy fighters who'd been attempting to flank Bravo Company's defensive perimeter. Alina's thermal imaging showed no movement from that position, just cooling fragments of equipment and the fatting heat signatures of what had once been human beings. Direct hit, Viper. Western Ridge is clear, Alina transmitted. Through her targeting pod, she could see Bravo Company beginning to move, soldiers carrying wounded comrades toward extraction points while maintaining suppressive fire against remaining enemy positions. Alina's heads-up display showed her ammunition status: 800 rounds remaining for the GAU-8, 3 Maverick missiles, and full defensive countermeasures. Below, perhaps a dozen enemy fighters remained in scattered positions, their cohesion broken but their weapons still dangerous. Time to finish this professionally. She selected her second Maverick and acquired a target, an enemy squad attempting to reposition for a final assault on Bravo Company's wounded. The missile's infrared seeker locked onto their vehicle, a technical truck mounted with a heavy machine gun. Alina's finger found the trigger, and mathematics once again reduced complexity to its simplest expression. The second Maverick missile streaked downward like a controlled meteor, its infrared guidance system tracking the heat signature of the enemy technical truck with mechanical precision. Alina watched through her targeting pod as the weapon impacted exactly where predicted, transforming vehicle and crew into an expanding fireball that briefly illuminated the entire western slope. The explosion's shock wave rolled across the valley floor, rattling equipment and sending surviving enemy fighters diving for whatever cover they could find. "Reaper, that's another confirmed kill," Thompson radioed, his voice carrying the grim satisfaction of a professional soldier watching superior firepower applied with surgical accuracy. "Enemy contact has decreased significantly. We're beginning casualty evacuation procedures." Over. Alina pulled up from her attack dive, scanning for remaining threats through her night vision systems. Scattered heat signatures indicated individual fighters attempting withdrawal toward predetermined extraction points, their tactical cohesion completely shattered. The ambush that had been carefully planned to destroy Bravo Company had become a rout, professional military aviation systematically dismantling amateur tactics. Rodriguez's F-16 made another pass, this time strafing a cluster of enemy positions with its M61 Vulcan cannon. The 6-barrel Gatling gun spit 20 rounds at 6,000 rounds per minute, each burst lasting only seconds but delivering devastating effect. Alina could see muzzle flashes winking out permanently as the cannon shells found their targets with lethal accuracy. Her radio crackled with an unexpected transmission. "Reaper, this is Hammer 2-1, Apache gunship inbound with a full load. Heard you could use some help." Over. The voice belonged to Chief Warrant Officer Martinez, a veteran helicopter pilot she'd worked with during counterinsurgency operations. His AH-64 Apache carried 16 Hellfire missiles and 1,200 rounds of 30 ammunition. Alina keyed her mic. Hammer 2-1, welcome to the party. We've got scattered enemy positions withdrawing toward the north. Could use your eyes on the ground, over. The Apache's advanced sensor systems could track individual fighters moving through terrain that would hide them from fixed-wing aircraft. Morrison's voice cut through their tactical frequency like a blade. All units, this is Theater Command. You are operating in direct violation of explicit orders. Return to base immediately or face courts-martial for insubordination and conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline. Alina switched off that frequency permanently. Morrison represented everything wrong with modern military leadership, a political calculation disguised as tactical prudence, career preservation prioritized over mission accomplishment. Tonight had proven that real leadership flowed from cockpits and fighting positions, not conference rooms and PowerPoint presentations. Through her targeting pod, Alina could see Bravo Company consolidating their wounded and preparing for extraction. Medical helicopters would arrive within the hour, followed by ground reinforcements to secure the area. The ambush had failed completely, its organizers either dead or fleeing toward Syria with tales of professional destruction delivered from above. Alina armed her third Maverick missile, acquiring the largest remaining heat signature. A group of enemy fighters attempting to establish an overwatch position for their retreating comrades. The missile's seeker head locked on, its guidance system calculating intercept vectors with inhuman precision. Magnum, 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 Alina transmitted as the weapon dropped from its pylon and ignited. The third Maverick's detonation marked the beginning of the end for organized enemy resistance in the valley. Alina watched through her thermal imaging as the explosion eliminated the overwatch position, its blast wave rolling across the rocky terrain like a wave of artificial thunder. Surviving enemy fighters scattered in all directions, their tactical formation completely broken, their carefully planned ambush transformed into desperate individual flight. Martinez's Apache emerged from behind the eastern ridgeline like a mechanical predator, its main rotor blades beating the air with rhythmic precision. The gunship's target acquisition and designation sites slewed across the battlefield, its thermal imaging systems tracking individual heat signatures moving through terrain that would have concealed them from earlier surveillance methods. Reaper, Hammer 2-1 has multiple targets moving north through the Wadi system, Martinez transmitted, his voice carrying the professional calm of someone who had been hunting human beings for 15 years. Request permission to engage, over. Alina keyed her radio. Hammer 2-1, you are cleared hot. Light them up. She pulled into a wide orbit above the valley, providing overwatch while the Apache began systematically eliminating fleeing enemy fighters with Hellfire missiles and 30 cannon fire. Below, Bravo Company had established a secure perimeter around their casualty collection point, their defensive positions finally silent as the last enemy muzzle flashes winked out permanently. Thompson's voice crackled through the radio. Reaper, Bravo 6 actual. We have 8 wounded, 2 critical. Medical evacuation is inbound. Your timing was impeccable, over. Alina felt the familiar weight of successful close air support, the knowledge that her actions had preserved American lives, that her 8 years of combat experience had been distilled into 40 minutes of precision violence that made the difference between soldiers coming home and soldiers coming home in boxes. This was why she joined the Air Force, why she'd endured the politics and bureaucracy and desk assignments. Rodriguez's F-16 made a final pass over the valley, his pilot reporting no remaining threats detected. The enemy force that had planned to ambush and destroy an American reconnaissance platoon had been systematically eliminated by professional military aviation, their superior position and careful planning rendered meaningless by thermal imaging systems and precision-guided munitions. Alina's radio crackled with Morrison's voice, transmitted on the emergency frequency. All participating aircraft, you are ordered to return to base immediately. This incident will be thoroughly investigated, and appropriate disciplinary action will be taken. His tone suggested that careers were about to be ended, that political consequences would follow tactical success. Alina switched to the tactical frequency and keyed her mic. "All stations, this is Reaper. Outstanding work tonight. Let's head home and see what the paperwork warriors have to say about mission accomplishment." Her voice carried the satisfaction of someone who had just remembered why she'd become a military pilot. The flight back to base would be silent except for the twin engines of her A-10, but Alina knew that something had changed tonight in the valley. Real leadership had emerged from cockpits and fighting positions, overruling the political calculations of generals more concerned with career preservation than mission accomplishment. The forward operating base appeared in Alina's night vision as a constellation of lights scattered across the desert floor, runway markers and hangar illumination creating geometric patterns against the darkness. She could see Morrison's command staff waiting on the tarmac beside military police vehicles, their presence suggesting that her landing would be followed by immediate arrest and confinement pending courts-martial proceedings. Alina keyed her radio to the tower frequency. "Tower, Reaper inbound with battle damage assessment required, over." It wasn't entirely untrue. Her A-10 had absorbed some small arms fire during the low-level attacks, though nothing that threatened flight safety or mission capability. Rodriguez's F-16 was already on final approach, its navigation lights strobing against the purple sky. Behind them, Martinez's Apache was escorting the medical evacuation helicopters carrying Bravo companies wounded back to the field hospital. The tactical situation had been resolved with textbook efficiency. 23 soldiers extracted alive, because 3 pilots had chosen to prioritize mission accomplishment over career preservation. Alina's wheels touched the runway with mechanical precision, her A-10 bleeding energy as she applied brakes and reverse thrust. Through her canopy, she could see Morrison himself standing beside the parking area, his staff car's emergency lights casting red and blue shadows across the assembled military police. The general's face was illuminated by radio glow, suggesting he was coordinating with higher headquarters about the appropriate response to tonight's unauthorized mission. Alina taxied to her parking spot and began shutdown procedures, each switch and lever moving according to muscle memory developed over 8 years of combat operations. The twin engines spooled down with characteristic whines, their heat signatures beginning to fade as cooling air flowed across hot metal surfaces. Around her, the familiar sounds of a flight line at night ground crew voices, vehicle engines, radio chatter, provided a backdrop to what might be her final flight as an Air Force pilot. Staff Sergeant Martinez appeared at the base of her aircraft with a boarding ladder, his weathered face creased with concern. "Captain, they're planning to arrest you the moment you step out of that cockpit," he said quietly. "Word is Morrison's got orders from the Pentagon to make an example out of tonight's activities." Alina removed her helmet and looked down at the sergeant who had maintained her aircraft through 6 combat deployments. "Martinez, in 8 years of flying, have I ever brought back an airplane that couldn't be fixed?" she asked. Martinez smiled despite the circumstances. "No, ma'am, you haven't, but this might be bigger than aircraft maintenance, Captain." Alina climbed down from her cockpit and walked toward Morrison and his assembled staff. Each step echoed across the tarmac like drumbeats, her flight boots making contact with concrete that had been worn smooth by 8 years of combat operations. Behind her, Rodriguez and Martinez were also approaching, their aircraft parked in a neat line that spoke of professional precision under fire. General Morrison stepped forward, his face illuminated by the harsh lights of the flight line. "Captain Vasquez, you are under arrest for disobeying direct orders, conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline, and unauthorized use of military aircraft." Alina stood at attention as the military police approached, their handcuffs glinting under the harsh flight line illumination. Behind Morrison, she could see his staff recording the arrest with digital cameras, ensuring that proper documentation existed for the court's martial proceedings that would follow. The political machinery of military justice was already grinding into motion, career-ending charges being carefully documented and filed. "General Morrison," Alina said, her voice carrying the same calm professionalism she'd used while engaging enemy targets. 23 American soldiers are alive tonight because professional military aviators prioritized mission accomplishment over political calculation. If that constitutes conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline, then I accept the consequences. Morrison's jaw tightened at her words. "Captain, your unauthorized actions have jeopardized carefully planned operations, violated explicit orders from theater command, and demonstrated a complete disregard for military hierarchy. Your personal opinions about leadership philosophy are irrelevant to the charges you're facing." Behind Alina, Rodriguez stepped forward. "General, I also participated in tonight's mission. If Captain Vasquez is being arrested, then I should face the same charges." His voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had spent 6 years delivering precision violence in defense of American forces. Martinez's Apache was settling onto the nearby helicopter pad, its rotor blades still turning as ground crew prepared to service the aircraft. Through her peripheral vision, Alina could see the medical evacuation helicopters landing at the field hospital, their cargo of wounded soldiers being transferred to waiting medical personnel. The tactical success of tonight's mission was being measured in lives saved rather than regulations followed. A military police sergeant approached Alina with restraints, his face professionally neutral. "Ma'am, I need you to place your hands behind your back," he said quietly. His tone suggested personal reluctance to arrest a combat veteran for the crime of mission accomplishment. Alina complied without resistance, feeling the cold metal of handcuffs closing around her wrists. The sensation was surreal after 8 years of combat operations, the mechanical click of restraints replacing the familiar weight of flight controls and weapon systems. Around her, the flight line continued its normal activities: aircraft launching and recovering, ground crew servicing equipment, operations continuing despite the political drama being enacted on the tarmac. Morrison stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper intended only for Alina's ears. "Captain, you've destroyed your career for a single mission that could have been accomplished through proper channels with appropriate planning. Your actions tonight have been tactically successful but strategically disastrous." Alina met his gaze without flinching. "General, proper channels and appropriate planning left 23 soldiers trapped in a kill zone while you calculated political ramifications. Sometimes tactical success is the only strategic victory that matters." The military police led Alina toward their vehicle, her flight suit and combat decorations creating an incongruous image against the backdrop of arrest and confinement. Behind her, Rodriguez was also being taken into custody, his F-16 pilot wings catching the harsh illumination of the flight line lights. The base detention facility was a collection of prefabricated buildings surrounded by chain-link fence and razor wire, designed to hold personnel pending judicial proceedings or transportation to permanent confinement facilities. Alina was processed through the intake procedures with mechanical efficiency: personal property inventory, medical screening, assignment to a holding cell that had been constructed to minimum standards for temporary confinement. Through the small window in her cell door, Alina could see activity continuing across the flight line. Aircraft were launching and recovering according to normal schedules. Ground crew were servicing equipment. Operations were proceeding despite the arrest of 3 combat pilots for the crime of mission accomplishment. The Air Force was too large an organization to be significantly disrupted by individual acts of tactical initiative. Alina's personal property had been reduced to basic clothing and hygiene items, her flight suit and equipment locked away as evidence for upcoming proceedings. The walls of her cell were bare concrete block, decorated only with graffiti left by previous occupants. names, dates, countdown marks tracking the passage of time in institutional custody. Her cell door opened to admit Chaplain Williams, a veteran Army officer who had served 2 combat deployments before attending seminary and joining the military chaplain service. His presence suggested that word of tonight's mission was spreading through unofficial channels, creating support networks that transcended service rivalries and military hierarchy. "Captain Vasquez," Williams said quietly, "I wanted to check on your spiritual and mental condition following tonight's events. Sometimes combat stress manifests in unexpected ways, particularly when combined with administrative consequences." Alina sat on the narrow cot that served as her bed, looking up at the chaplain who had counseled dozens of combat veterans through post-deployment transitions. "Chaplain, my spiritual condition is excellent. I participated in a mission that saved 23 American lives. My mental condition is equally sound. I understand exactly what I did and why I did it." Williams nodded, settling into the single chair provided for visits. "Captain, I've received reports that Bravo Company's casualties were successfully evacuated and that all personnel are expected to recover fully. Your actions tonight prevented what could have been a significant tactical defeat." Alina felt the familiar satisfaction of mission accomplishment, the knowledge that her 8 years of combat experience had been distilled into 40 minutes of precision violence that made the difference between soldiers coming home alive or in transfer cases. "Chaplain, in 8 years of combat operations, I've learned that real leadership sometimes requires choosing between regulations and results." Williams leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Captain, you should know that unofficial reports of tonight's mission are already circulating through social media and military forums. Video footage from helmet cameras and aircraft sensors has been leaked to news organizations. The political ramifications of your arrest may be more complex than General Morrison anticipated." Alina nodded, understanding that modern warfare occurred in multiple dimensions simultaneously: tactical, strategic, political, and informational. Tonight's mission was being evaluated not only by military tribunals, but by public opinion and media coverage that could influence political decisions at levels far above Morrison's authority. The next morning brought Chaplain Williams back to Alina's cell, this time accompanied by Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Brennan from the Judge Advocate General's office. Brennan was a former fighter pilot who had transitioned to military law after a career-ending injury, her understanding of combat operations providing crucial context for defending aviators facing courts-martial proceedings. "Captain Vasquez," Brennan said, settling into the visitor's chair, "I've been assigned as your legal counsel for the upcoming proceedings. Before we discuss your case, I need to inform you that the situation has evolved significantly since your arrest last night." Alina looked up from the legal documents she'd been reviewing, her attention focusing on the JAG officer who would determine whether her military career ended in prison or with some form of administrative resolution. "Colonel, what kind of evolution are we talking about?" Brennan opened her briefcase and extracted a tablet computer displaying news articles and social media posts. "Captain, footage from last night's mission has been leaked to multiple media outlets. Helmet camera recordings from Bravo Company, targeting pod video from your A-10, and radio transmissions have been compiled into what's being called the most dramatic combat rescue footage of the decade." Alina examined the tablet screen, seeing her own aircraft diving toward enemy positions, while Bravo Company's soldiers provided radio commentary describing the tactical situation. The videos had been edited professionally, combining multiple perspectives into a coherent narrative that demonstrated both the desperation of the ground forces and the precision of the air support. "The Pentagon is receiving hundreds of calls from congressional offices, media organizations, and veteran advocacy groups," Brennan continued. "Initial public reaction is overwhelmingly supportive of your actions, several prominent military comment.